Hi, this is Vicky of SingleMotherAhoy.com, and you're listening to my podcast. Today I'm going to talk a bit about my sugar-free journey again, because I'm still doing it and still struggling somewhat, but I am only really a couple of weeks in, and I've only been completely sugar-free for a couple of days, which is why I'm struggling. I was also going to talk about the myth that it's fat that gives us diseases, and fat that gives us high cholesterol, and fat that makes us fat. But first of all, I'm going to talk about my history with bonkers diets. I have done a lot of bonkers diets. I've done them all, but kind of half-heartedly. I've never really been one to stick to anything that said I couldn't drink Coke or eat Mars bars, to be honest. I did the metabolic typing diet. I bought a really thick book and read it from cover to cover. I did a questionnaire in the back where it asked you loads of questions like, if you eat cornflakes for tea, how do you feel in the morning? And if you eat a really big bowl of fat pasta, does it make you feel rough? And determined from that I needed to eat lots of protein. So I started eating lots of protein, and I stopped eating pasta, which I didn't really eat much anyway, and nothing happened. Although I did notice actually that I didn't feel kind of over full when I'd eaten my tea. But it didn't make a difference at all to how I felt other than that. My favourite one, which is a classic example of how these stupid diets manage to wheedle their ways under the shelves. I bought a book, I don't think I've still got it actually. It was called the Shangri-La Diet, and this guy had come up with this thing that he said that it couldn't be, there were no scientific studies or anything because everyone was scared to touch it because it would just blow modern scientific thinking, out of the water. It was just too out there for people to believe. And the idea was that we all have our set rate or our set level where our weight is, and we can kind of work hard to lose weight, but always go back to that point. And if we put lots of weight on kind of over a stressful period or something, we'll always go back to that point, and they called it your set point. But this guy had discovered a clever way to lower your set point, and I forget his scientific, in inverted commas, idea or his reasoning for how it worked. But basically what you were supposed to do was either have a tablespoon of cooking oil at morning and night, or have fructose dissolved in hot water in the morning and at night. And I went out and bought some fructose, and then I went out and bought some cooking oil, and I have got the sweetest tooth in the world. I can sit and eat chocolate and jelly babies and Haribos until the cows come home. But drinking a mug of hot water sweetened with fructose, I was nearly sick. That's when I moved on to the cooking oil. Have you ever tried drinking cooking oil? It makes you feel sick. Surprisingly, I didn't lose any weight and nothing happened, and eventually I gave up and started using the cooking oil for cooking, and the fructose went in the bin because it was ridiculous. I just kind of was saying that to just kind of show I have done bonkers diets before. I've tried loads of things. Every magazine, I went through a stage where I bought every single magazine. You get magazines like on the front cover, it's like, lose 10 pounds in 5 minutes, follow this simple plan that Britney Spears did before her wedding. I used to buy those magazines, and I used to read them and go, but this just says eat carrots and celery and peanut butter, and I was doing that anyway, and I'm not skinny. But I was still drinking Coke and eating Mars bars at the same time as doing all this. This is the first time in my life that I've ever gone, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And actually stopped drinking Coke and eating Mars bars and cake and just anything with added sugar. I was eating loads of it, and now that I've stopped, I find that if I do eat some of it, I feel really sick. So last week, Samara's birthday, I spent the entirety of Wednesday, literally an entire day, making her birthday cake, and I was really pleased with myself. And I had bits of cake and bits of icing, and basically an entire bowl full of butter icing left over. And I texted my sister and said, do you want to come over here and have this stuff because I can't have it in the house? She came over, used most of it, the rest of it went in the bin. I did not touch it. On Samara's birthday, we went out for lunch. She had a pudding. I was quite happy to sit there. I had a Diet Coke instead of just water because it was a celebration. But I was perfectly happy to sit through all of that. I didn't have cake at the birthday tea. I just had vegetables. Everything was absolutely fine. I felt fantastic. And then the following day, the Friday, we brought the cake home from my mum's, and it was basically half of the entire cake because my sister had taken some home and other people had a slice, but there just weren't many of us. So I had half a cake, and half of the Smarties that, I don't know if you saw the pictures, the cake was full of Smarties. There were 11 tubes of Smarties in that cake. and only half of them had been taken, so the other half was still there. And I have to say, I did eat a slice of cake. I gave in and ate a slice of cake, I think either Friday night or Saturday night, and I felt drunk. I got the shakes, I started to feel quite sick, and then I started to feel really tired and ill, and I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning feeling like I had a hangover, and I thought, that really I just thought, although I hadn't completely cut out sugar, I had cut it right back to practically nothing. And I thought, cool. Normally, a couple of months ago, I would have had a litre of Coke, 2 slices of cake. I would have had a pudding at that meal. I would have had that 2, 3, 4 times as much sugar as there was in that cake, and gone to bed and been normal and been fine in the morning because my body was just kind of dulled to what it was. I suppose it's like if you're drinking an awful lot and then you stop and then you have a pint and you get drunk. It's that sort of thing, but with sugar, and you think, nobody thinks drinking an awful lot is good for you, really, apart from pirates, and, well, they're different. Nobody thinks that drinking loads and loads is good for you, but we all eat loads of sugar so that our senses are kind of dulled to it and we don't realise. The other day I realised, after I'd bought them in the shop because I'm an idiot, that Pom Bears have sugar added to them. All these things that are savoury, all these things that are marketed to children have sugar in them. And I was on, I think, Twitter talking about it, and someone said, why would they add sugar to that? And I was like, because it makes them, have you not noticed, I cannot sit and eat 1 packet of Pom Bears. If there's more than 1 packet of Pom Bears in the house, they are getting eaten. And I've said, basically, I'm not buying them again after. I kept the ones that I'd bought because Samara really likes them and she'd seen me buy them, and it's not fair then to not let her eat them. But once they're gone, they're gone. I'm not buying them. They're really, really moreish, and I really think it's the sugar in them that does that, because I'm not like that with other crisps that don't have sugar added, just those ones. It's terrible. So the other thing I was going to talk about is the whole low fat and cholesterol and the fat myth thing. I was reading a book last week that said that actually recent scientific studies have shown that people who eat low fat foods, like low fat yogurt or skimmed milk and all that nonsense, actually put on weight. I don't recall the entire kind of contents of the study, but it was really like, if you eat a lot of low fat foods, I don't know if it's because the low fat foods have the sugar added or if there's something else going on. But they did a similar thing with people who have sweeteners instead of sugar, and they found that they weren't any skinnier than people that were just eating normal food. So I don't like low fat anything. I went through a stage where I drank 1% milk when I used to have protein shakes, and I thought it was the protein shakes that made it disgusting, but then I put 1% milk in a drink and it was the 1% milk. Plus, obviously protein shakes are disgusting. I just basically stopped having it. And people kind of balk at me when I look in my fridge and they see full fat milk, and then they go, well, you've got a toddler, that's for the toddler. Yeah, it is for the toddler, because in my coffee I have cream. The last year I've been drinking cream in my coffee. And actually, although I did put on weight last year, not as much as you would expect someone to if they were drinking, I was having 2 cups of coffee a day with cream instead of sugar. And, the world didn't end. My bum has not melted its way down to my knees yet. There's still time. So that it got me thinking. I've always thought for a long time, I can't remember where the idea kind of came to me from, but I've never really believed the whole you are what you eat and fat will make you fat, because I didn't understand how fat kind of got into your stomach and then suddenly kind of fought its way through your stomach and onto your hips. I didn't really get that. So I've been kind of I've been reading loads of books about this stuff lately. I've just finished The Sweet Poison Quit Plan, which is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. And there's a whole thing, both of the Sweet Poison books talk about I think his name is Ansel Keys, or Dr. Keys. He's really famous because at the end of the Second World War, or during the Second World War, he formulated K rations, which the US Army used, and it was kind of given to soldiers as a completely balanced meal that they would take, and they were called K rations after Dr. Keys. But what he also did was promote this whole idea of fat making us fat, and before that point, nobody really talked about it. Nobody thought that fat made you fat. People just thought, oh, he eats a lot of food, he is fat. And then Dr. Keys came along, And he did this study called the 7 Countries Study, which is really famous. It's got a Wikipedia page and everything. He studied the eating habits of 22 countries in the 10 years after the Second World War, and then produced this 7 country study. So 22 countries, the data from 22 countries, and only 7 were used in this, what he published. What he said that it showed, and he plotted it all on a graph and everything. If it's got a graph, it must be true. It showed that the more fat a particular country ate, the higher the incidence of heart disease in that country. So he was looking at, American businessmen in a country that, the rise of kind of fast food and convenience food and the end of the Second World War, people were eating a lot of fat and American businessmen were having heart attacks and keeling over. I think at that point, 2 out of every 3 deaths was cardiovascular related. But why did he only choose those 7? Because a lot of the other countries in that 22 would have obscured his data and would have not have given the picture that he wanted to show. He was convinced that it was fat that was causing cardiovascular disease, it was fat that was causing cholesterol buildup, it was fat that was making everybody fat. So he chose these 7 countries and used their data on a graph to show high fat consumption equals high heart disease, end of. If you look at the other 15 countries, it shows a kind of a different picture, because people in Greece have a high-fat diet and low incidence of heart disease. Dr. Keyes actually used that example of Greece when he and his wife came up with the Mediterranean diet, which you've probably heard of, because it has been doing the rounds since, I think, the 60s, 70s. They came up with this whole Mediterranean diet, and it's been called loads of different names since, but basically it was, the don't eat fat kind of thing. Or only eat, that was it. His argument was, well, those countries where the fat thing is not true is because there are different kinds of fat, and it's saturated fat that's the problem, and people in Greece have olive oil, and that's a good kind of fat, so that's okay, so that's why they don't get ill. And then they came up with the Mediterranean diet because of it. But if you look at Finland showed low fat in their diet, but high incidence of heart disease. And I don't think there's really any answer for that was given. Also, if you look at the Maasai tribes in Kenya, they live almost entirely off of beef. That's all they eat, and they kind of drink milk, and that's all they have is full fat milk from the beef cattle, and then they slaughter the beef cattle and eat them. They don't have vegetables, they don't have yogurts, they don't have added sugar to anything. And I have never seen on one of those, National Geographic documentaries a fat Maasai tribesman. In North America, the more North American Inuits, that you'd call Eskimos, live almost entirely on whale blubber because that's all there is up there. And they're not particularly fat either. They're just average sized for what they do. So it's kind of, he's cherry picked these 7 countries out of 22 to show this. And it's a kind of an obscured view. And actually, a lot of studies have come out recently, or in the last, I think, 15 years, thousands of studies. Scientists have had these poor rats in cages for years, feeding them fat, trying to make them fat, and feeding them fat, trying to give them heart disease, and it's not worked. And they've never managed to reproduce what Keyes' study said. But they feed them sugar, and lo and behold, the rats all get really fat and keel over from heart attacks. I think it's really interesting because everything is really geared towards low fat and not eating fat, and you mustn't eat fat, and fat is the bad guy. And if you're eating a lot of sugar, then the presence of sugar in your bloodstream, the fatty acids caused by the sugar, that is kind of traps the fat that you eat in your system. I can't really explain it very well, but basically, if you're eating a lot of fat and a lot of sugar, then yes, the fat is a problem. If you're not eating a lot of sugar and you're still eating a lot of fat, then it just goes on its way, and it doesn't cause a problem. And I really believe that to be true. I just don't buy the whole low fat thing, and I think there's just a massive industry that's grown up around low fat and sweeteners and all of this business, and it would just, a lot of people would lose out huge amount of money, a whole industry. If you think of the sugar industry, the big names in the sugar companies, the sweeteners that are mostly also made from sugar and contain fructose, or just chemicals that scientists happened to stumble upon while they were looking for something else in the lab. If you look at that and the low-fat industry and all of this diet stuff,